Show of hands. Come on. Okay. By the end of this, hopefully you will understand this a lot better. But right now, before we get started, I would like you to think about where you fall on these spectrums. As far as gender identity, what do you identify as? Biological sex, or sex at birth. Gender expression. How do you express yourself as far as gender goes? Do you dress androgynous? Do you dress as a male, female, somewhere in between? Sexual orientation. What is your sexual orientation? Where do you fall on the spectrum? Just think about that while I am speaking, and then maybe by the end of it, your ideas might change a little bit. And I'll go through it with you. I'm probably going to stun some of you too, but we will see. So androgyny. Does anybody know what androgyny is? No? Nobody does. Okay. Androgyny, because you kind of need to know that in order to figure out the gender expression one. So androgyny is basically somebody like Jeffree Star. He is biologically a male, but he looks like he can be either male or female. He also can, somebody that's androgynous can also identify as a male or a female or both, even neither. Have I sold you yet? So androgyny is basically where you can go either way, or you can look like both at the same time, or really neither. Another thing that I would like to talk about, just in case you didn't hear the introduction, I will introduce myself up here. My name is Skylar. I am a college student. I do work at the hospital, and I love my job. But I do things like this because it's very important for trans education to be out there. Whenever people don't know about issues that we go through, we can't expect them to understand. So, pronouns are very important in our community. Think about what pronoun you go by. She, he, do you care? For us, it's usually a lot more important. For us, it's a lot more prominent for us in our community, and we really care about how we are perceived and how we come across. For me, I prefer male, masculine pronouns, and if I get identified as a female, which doesn't really happen anymore, I'm sure you can kind of see why. Doesn't really happen anymore, but to be identified as the wrong gender, it causes dysphoria. And dysphoria is basically when your body is telling you something that your brain is not. Your brain tells you one thing, and then everybody else in society tells you something completely different. I was born a female. I was not born in this body. Sorry. I just got this look on his face, and I love disbelief. I was born a female. I have transitioned into a male. Yes, you can do that. I had no clue. Fortunately, there are things out there that are available where you can do stuff like that. Growing up, I did not feel like I was a female. It just didn't feel right. I never felt okay in my body. It was completely unnatural to me. I felt like I was trapped in somebody else's body, and in fact, even now, whenever I refer back to that person, I don't even refer to them as myself. I refer to them as my dead twin sister, which might be morbid to you guys, but to me, that's exactly who she was, because she was never me. I was just trapped in her body. So, pronouns in our community, there's masculine, there's he, his, him, and there's she, her, hers. Does anybody know of another alternative that could be androgynous?
They?
Yes. There is they or z, it's ze. You can do their, them, refer to them. If you don't know somebody's perceived gender, what they want to identify as, sometimes it's a lot more polite to kind of avoid it because you don't want to offend them. And with somebody that's very sensitive with your gender and your gender, the the way that people perceive your gender to be, it is very sensitive to get identified as the wrong sex. So the correct thing to do would either avoid identifying as one sex or the other, or you can always ask. And most of the time, if you ask us, we're completely fine with that, because we would rather have you identify us as the correct sex than something that we don't see ourselves as, and that causes a lot of dysphoria. Basically, it triggers a lot of emotions, and we start thinking, well, maybe I'm not identifying myself well enough. Maybe I'm not dressed the right way. Maybe people just aren't understanding, or I'm hated, or I'm being ostracized, or they're making fun of me, and it just throws this whole big snowball effect, and it just keeps going and going and going. So definitely ask. That's definitely the best thing to do. Ask what pronouns we prefer to use. That's never a rude question. Outing people is something that is never okay. It doesn't matter if you're a lesbian, a gay man, somebody that's bisexual, somewhere in between all those spectrums, or if you're somebody that identifies as a transgender person. It's never okay to out somebody. The reason being, it's not your business. It's not your business whether I identify as trans or whether I want to say that to people. Another reason why is because that can be very detrimental to us. Think about how often you hear about the transgender community, even in the media, anywhere at all. Like in the hospitals, whenever we go to the hospital, it's very hard for us to find somebody that is educated on the transgender community and understands what we're going through, as well as the hormone process and how that affects our body, as well as everything else medically that's going on whenever we go in. So it's very hard to find somebody that is okay with everything. And especially in a smaller community, it's even harder, because people aren't okay with stuff if they never hear about it. And let's face it, LASD, they won't even talk about sex. Do you really think that they're going to talk about the transgender community? It's not going to happen. Not at least, probably in the next 10 years, at least. So outing people can be very, very negative. You can get a very bad effect. People can get fired from their job. I've heard people that get fired, and it's not just people that are of the LGBT community. There's states that protect people orientation-wise, but not gender identity-wise. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't think about whenever it comes to laws being passed and civil unions and gay marriage being recognized. It's gay marriage being recognized. It's LGBT marriage. It's not people that are in the transgender community. And a lot of times people think it's all lumped together, but the thing is, LGBT people have something in common. Does anybody know what that is? Yes, I do. Because you already know. Anybody else? What is it that lesbian, gay, and bisexual people have in common?
Sexual orientation.
Exactly. And somebody that's transgender, it has nothing to do with orientation at all. Whenever you are transgender, it's your gender identity, what gender you identify as. Whereas orientation, you can be any gender. Gender identity, you can be any orientation. Have I confused you guys yet?
Yes, you have.
At least there's an honest person in the audience.
Angela.
Gender identity. It's the first one right here. Actually, I'm not going to start with that one. We're going to start with biological sex. What sex were you assigned at birth? Think about it that way. That's the easiest way. Sex is what the doctor assigns you as once they spank your butt and you cry and everything else. What goes on your birth certificate right then? That's your biological sex. Gender identity. What gender do you identify as? So essentially, what sex do you identify as? But sex, again, is your biological sex that you were assigned at birth. So what gender? Male, female, somewhere in between? What gender identity do you identify as? Gender queer. Does anybody know what that is? Gender queer is basically where it's kind of like androgyny with your gender identity instead of gender expression. Since you guys already know that, it's a lot easier to explain it that way. It's also termed as gender fluid. You identify as somewhere in between, not necessarily as one gender or the other. Does everybody know what intersex is? Is there anybody that doesn't? Raise your hand. Okay. Intersex. There's many different ways to be born as an intersex person. Essentially, what it is the person has both male and female parts. It could be organs, it can be something on the outside, it could be any variety of the two. It's a very wide spectrum as far as the intersex community goes. But you're born some way or another as both sex. Now that's not in the mind and in the body. Those are two different things. Your body saying you're one sex versus your brain saying you're a different sex. That's completely different. This is physical characteristics.
If you have those males and females, if you're raised male, if you're raised female, does that change things?
A lot of times at birth, the doctor tells the parents to pick.
Right.
And so at birth, the baby will go through gender reassignment surgery and have to go through whatever the parents choose for their gender to be. There have been cases that that baby is raised as the gender that their parents picked, and then later on found out that that wasn't what they identified as. They should have been able to choose the other one. And there's a lot of commentary and a lot of discussion going on as far as whether or not that's ethical for the parents to decide what the child should be born as and raised as at birth, and going through that gender-altering surgery without being able to choose on their own. Gender expression. We've already gone through this. Androgyny. You know what androgyny is now. Gender expression. The way you dress, the way that you want others to perceive you as far as physical looks, physical characteristics. 100% masculine, 100% feminine, somewhere between. Sexual orientation. I think that's something that most of us are very familiar with. Kinsey actually has a scale, the Kinsey scale, of course, and he shows the whole scale and the whole spectrum of sexual orientation. Very, very few people fall on one side or the other of the spectrum, completely one side or the other. Same with all the others, minus this one, because this one's a little bit assigned to us. But the other three, very, very few people fall on one side completely of the spectrum. One other thing that is widely overlooked in our community is crime. Crime goes unreported, unnoticed, and people a lot of times don't even do anything whenever a crime is committed, and that's even the authorities. People that are male to female, they were born a male, they transition into a female. People that are male to female of color have a higher rates of being discriminated against whenever it comes to things. There's been a lot of people in the trans community that will have something happen, like they get raped or they get assaulted or they even get murdered, and the trial just doesn't pan out. They never get justice. Their family never gets justice. They never get justice. There was actually an incident where there was a male to female person and they got attacked, and she was laying on the streets and bleeding out. The ambulance showed up. They found out that this person was male to female, that she was transgender, and the EMT that was on the scene did not work on her. Because of that, life-saving measures were halted, and she did not make it. That is not a rare occurrence in our community. there have been people that have gone into the bathroom of what they identify as, and they get attacked. I've heard of trans men that have gone into the bathroom and they get attacked, raped, they get negative comments carved with a knife into their chest. And this stuff goes unseen. You don't hear about it in the media. Very, very rarely do you ever. Whenever the media portrays us, they don't show us in a positive light most of the time. If you start looking at shows and you start realizing anytime there's a trans character, well, the big one right now is Orange is the New Black. That trans woman is actually pretty well portrayed. There's a few things that are not quite accurate. If you are in jail as a trans person, you are going to be put in a jail cell with the people of your assigned sex at birth. So for me, I was female at birth. I'm going to be put in a female prison, looking like this.
But how would they know?
You get physicals. You get frisked. You get stripped down. People know.
And you can't change your birth certificate at all?
I have.
It takes
But it
a
doesn't
while.
matter.
It doesn't matter.
It does not matter. If you are convicted of a crime and you get put in prison, it doesn't matter.
You're still female.
You are still your assigned sex.
That's insulting. That's insulting.
Yeah. You work so hard to be seen as the gender that you feel like you are. And to get to that point where you transition far enough that everybody finally sees you as that. And then to know that something as simple as that, I mean, if I get a DWI and I'm going 90, I will get arrested. Just something, it doesn't even have to be something like capital murder or anything like that. If it's something small even, if I get arrested, I will go to a female prison. And that just makes it even more hard for somebody like me to fit in a prison where you want to fit in. You do not want to stand out in a prison. It's kind of like the whole don't drop the soap thing. It's just, you don't want to stand out in a prison.
What would it take to change that? Supreme Court?
Government. Because I went and I changed everything legally. I've gone through hormone replacement therapy. I've gone through gender therapy, which you have to do in order to get your hormones legally. In order to change your name and gender, you have to go through gender therapy. They basically want to make sure that you're sane, not crazy, or trying to avoid tax purposes. And yes, believe it or not, somebody did that, and that's the whole reason why we have to go through this. But, so, because of things like that, we have to go through all these hurdles to finally get seen as the person that we are. I've been on hormones for over a year now. I was lucky enough to be able to grow facial hair fairly quickly, and my voice deepened very, very quickly and very fast. It's not always like that though. And with people that are male to female, they actually have to train their voice. They aren't as fortunate as we are, where the hormones change their voice. They have to actually train their voice. But yes, I have had my name and gender changed on every document that I have. And so in the eyes of the law, I'm seen as a male. And actually, I am legally able to marry, because if you are heterosexual, not based on your birth sex, but on the sex that is on your driver's license, if you are heterosexual, regardless of whether you're a transgender, you can get married. And that is anywhere in the US. And to me, that's kind of fucked up. Yes, I just said that, but it really is. It irks me because all my LGBT friends cannot do that. But because I changed my gender, I can. Come on. This is ridiculous. Safe places. It is important for us to have safe places where we know that it's okay to be ourselves. We know that we have allies out there. One thing that the transgender community here in Lovelock constantly fights for is trying to find safe bathrooms, gender-neutral bathrooms, where maybe it's a one-stall bathroom, or it's a bathroom like a family bathroom, where you can go in and it doesn't matter what gender you are, but you can go in, you can safely identify as whatever you are and go into that bathroom versus having to go into one where you don't know how people are going to take it. With me, I'm far enough in my transition and I pass well enough that people aren't going to question it. Now, it might make me still feel uncomfortable, and it does because I'm constantly worrying, what if somebody finds out? But for somebody that isn't as far along in their transition or that doesn't pass as well, it's a lot harder for them to get up the courage to go into the bathroom that they identify as, because if you have somebody that is male-bodied and they are more effeminate and they go into a female bathroom, but they are very obviously not completely female in a female bathroom, it's not going to go over well. Same if it's the opposite going into a male bathroom. It's more widely accepted because there's people that look more feminine of the male persuasion. And so, plus, guys, let's face it, we don't pay attention whenever we go to the bathroom. That is one big thing I noticed as far as the differences between the bathroom issue. We just don't care. Girls, you guys have to have a whole party to go to the bathroom, and then you're in there for 15 minutes, God knows doing what. You're just in there, and we're just sitting out there waiting, when she's coming, what's going on, do we need to send in a search party, and then the female friends that are still out there go in for a search party, 15 more minutes. So, there's a lot of differences as far as gender goes. One thing that surprised me, you always hear about your insurance, your car insurance. Who pays more, generally?
Males.
Why?
Because they're said to like drive faster.
Yes. But I was the same person. And I changed my gender, and I got charged more for my insurance. Really? I'm the same person with the same driving history and everything. It's nuts. You can't look at little kids the same way, because it's a little bit creepier if somebody that is a guy is looking at a 3-year-old saying they're cute versus a female saying that they're cute. There's a lot of different things that you have to learn whenever you transition and you switch over to the gender that you identify as. Okay, so somebody random tell me what gender identity they identify as. Really? Do I have to call people out? Because I will.
What did you hear you?
Somebody random tell me what gender identity that they identify as.
Male.
Male?
Female.
Okay, so male, the same person, biological sex.
Male. What would a doctor say?
Male? Okay, what about gender expression?
No.
Male.
Kind of male. A little bit over.
So we're
Yeah, right about there. Yeah.
Okay. Sexual orientation.
All the way over there.
Are you sure?
Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Yes.
Okay. So, gender identity. What gender identity do you think I identify as? You're not going to offend me.
Now?
Male.
Okay. Got that right. Biological sex.
Female.
Ah. Gender expression.
Masculine.
Masculine.
We're at on the masculine scale.
I'd say all the way over.
All the way
All the
over.
way.
All the way.
Is that based on what I'm wearing? Or is it
Yeah.
because that's what
Yeah.
you think you're supposed to say? Okay. Sexual orientation.
Halfway.
Halfway?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who cares?
That's cheating! That is totally cheating. So, Cher? What do you think about Cher?
Cher?
Cher.
Like the singer?
Yes.
I would say, like, what do I think about her?
Uh-huh.
Like, according to this?
Uh-huh.
Or that she's
She's
fabulous?
Oh, okay. Do you think that she's attractive?
Yeah, I think she's pretty.
That's funny. Who else?
Who else do you think is attractive?
That's female.
Jessica Lange.
Okay. Who else?
That's pushing it. But wouldn't sexual orientation be who I would be, like, sexually attracted to?
It can be. But isn't there some sort of attraction, even if it's just physical?
Oh, now you're making me question so much. Move your shit out of the house. I'm straight. I guess.
For the record, it's not any easier coming out more than once. It's not.
I can't do that.
Don't do it unless you're sure.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm very sure.
You are?
No. Erase that.
Oh. So you're not sure?
What? I'm so confused.
So you're not sure? Is that what we decided on?
Do I have to change this on Facebook?
Well, everything is official once it's finally on Facebook. So. That's up to you. If you want to take that leap out of the closet, then go for it. But anyways, a little bit of humor. I have come out of the closet 3 times. Yep, 3 times, and it's not any easier. The first time, I was what? Okay, and my orientation was. Catching on. Okay. The next time, what?
Oh, I said I got this.
Oh, I thought you said.
Confusing.
Never mind.
No, I got this.
Okay. The next time, I was confused about my gender identity. So, cheat. You've heard this before. Okay. The last time.
Somebody's back there just saying names.
So, the first time I came out, it was somewhat okay. I say somewhat because I was born in a religious family and they were very conservative. So they weren't exactly okay with that. The second time, they were highly confused, and I just told them, don't even worry about it, because there's no way I can explain it to you, and you understand. So the third time, though, was the kicker. And the third time, I lost pretty much everyone in my entire family. Whenever you grow up in a society that is not used to education about your community, you're going to face things like that. You're going to face discrimination. You're going to face people that just don't understand or simply don't even want to try. That's not just with our community, that's with anybody, not even necessarily in the LGBT community. My advice, though, be yourself, because I am much happier now than I have ever been in my entire life. I have been out as a trans guy since 2008 or 2009, and going in this transition and being at the point that I am now, I am so incredibly happy because I can finally be myself. I don't have to worry about what other people think because, quite frankly, I don't care anymore.
Thank you.
I just want to be who I am and just be left alone and go to work, go to school, not have to worry about anything, just like anybody else. Just like anybody would hope that others would feel. My job doesn't know, because you look at me, most people in this room, whenever I told them I was born female, had a very shocked look on their face.
That was me.
You're not the only one. And so people don't expect that at all. And I am very easily able to pass and be seen as the gender that I identify as. Luckily, because not everybody is fortunate enough to be in that situation. But my advice is,
Can you be punished anyway for that though?
do what?
Can you be punished for that anyway?
Not at my job.
And I'm saying you cannot be punished for not recognizing yourself and who you are.
For telling them that I'm transgender, no, I cannot. That's something that's personal to me, and they can't do anything
That's
about
too
it.
much business. Because you're living.
That, exactly. If it was not changed on my documents, I could be punished for lying to them. But since everything is changed on everything, then they can't really do anything about it, and nobody here really knows. Do you guys have any questions? Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but is Texas not a no-fire state? Meaning that if they didn't like your eye color, they'd fire you for that. There's no reason. So if they did end up investigating through word of mouth, would they consider you lying on your application and terminating you at that point?
No. Luckily, UMC is actually very inclusive. They have a non-discrimination policy that covers pretty much anything. Gender expression, gender identity, and sexual orientation are all included. So luckily, you don't have to worry about that. But yes, as a state as a whole, you could be gay and get fired, and nobody's really going to care.
And the reason I brought that up is I have a very good friend of mine that's a cancer survivor as well as I am, and he was actually in a break room discussing his being a cancer survivor. And by the end of that day, he was fired for lying on his application. So he was discriminated against. So now the guy trying to find a job now, he can care less now. He'd rather be unemployed for the rest of his life because of discrimination. In Missouri is where it happened, and it's a no-fire state too. And they told him he wasn't performing at his job level.
Of course they did. And they will do everything they can to prove that that was the
He
case.
went to court, challenged it, and lost. Even the lawyer had told him, he said, there's not a judge here, but I'll be glad to take on the case and take your money, but it's not gonna happen. Because I can tell you, Missouri's a no-fire state, and they've already got it on record that you weren't performing, and sure enough, when they showed up in court, that's what the judge ruled as. Sorry.
Yep.
So he spent all that time in aggravation and stuff, and it discriminated. So being a cancer survivor, he feels left out in the community as acceptance as well.
I was gonna ask about offensive terminology, what words to stay away from.
Good question. Okay. Anybody have any ideas what might be on here?
Tranny.
Okay.
It,
What else?
Oh, that's
Is hermaphrodite one? Or, intersex?
Hermaphrodite is kind of one of those that can go either way. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's somebody that's intersex. The proper term would be intersex being. However, there are people that self-identify as a hermaphrodite. So if you want to play it safe, use intersex. If you want to piss somebody off, use the other. But be very, very careful when and where you use that because it's not always appropriate. And even if the person does self-identify as that, it's not always okay for you to go and call them that. Same with tranny. There are people that call each other trannies or that identify as a tranny, but as a general rule, it's not okay in our community. Any others?
Dyke?
Transgender-wise.
Oh.
Yes.
She-male.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
Don't they go with he, she?
They use them interchangeably, but they are separate terms. Oh, I
got
remember.
that.
Can anybody tell me why? First of all, can anybody tell me what transvestite is? Yes. It's also, in our community, a lot of times, it has been used interchangeably with somebody that is trans and a prostitute. This has two. But this is more common to use in people that are older, that have transitioned, because that's medically what they used to call people that were transgendered. So, what's okay?
Your name,
There you go.
your name.
Whatever they do.
Gender identity. Just for you that don't know. That means gender identity. It's a proper gender identity, whatever they identify as. What was that?
Proper manner, sure, you know. I don't know you, and I don't know how to dress you, you know, excuse me, sir.
Just excuse me.
So,
He's real
Avoiding
sick.
it.
Excuse me.
Female, female?
we have acronyms. What is this?
Female to male.
Meaning what?
Female to male.
Meaning what?
Female, like biologically a female.
Yes. And this one?
Biologically a male.
Okay.
Y'all
I
good.
love that, okay, John.
And with trans man and trans female.
Let's do trans man, trans woman. What about just trans? Or
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, but like,
with an asterisk? Does everybody know what the asterisk means? Okay. Transgender is a very, very wide category. It involves people that are androgynous, people that are genderqueer, gender fluid, male to female, female to male. Maybe they identify as, I don't even know. It's so broad that it's hard for even us to know exactly where everything is. So it's basically like an umbrella term. If you are wanting to identify somebody that is a trans man or woman, or FTM and TF, you would use that without the asterisk. If you're wanting to identify somebody in the transgender community, with the asterisk. Because the asterisk makes it to where it involves everyone versus just people that are trans, like MTF, FTM.
And what about the people that don't have a gender?
What about them?
So the one with the Z?
So there's ZE, there's also Zier, and or Zer, or
Is this French or something?
I want to say it actually might be. Has everyone heard of this one?
No. How do you say
Okay, look it up on YouTube. Because there's a very, very awesome video. It's actually done at a poetry jam, and it's titled this, and it explains the transgender community pretty well, and our inner turmoil pretty
that?
well.
Do you pronounce that?
Some people pronounce it here, like H-E-R-E, and some pronounce it her. So it really just depends on who is pronouncing it. But her, if you do that, then it's almost like
Yeah.
that. So you kind of have to base it on the person if they're okay with that. Any other questions? Yes.
What are offensive questions?
Offensive questions, that's another good one. Stuff that you wouldn't ask to somebody that's not transgender. What genitalia do you have? What's between your pants? What do you have going on down there? How do you have sex? Yeah, how do you have sex?
Are you asking?
No! No!
She surprisingly has pictures.
No. I don't want to know how you have sex. She was asking what questions are offensive to ask. I said, how do you have sex when you want to? Please don't. Please don't. But yes, generally anything that is rude to ask somebody else that's not your best friend, that's not your partner, is rude to ask us. Just because we were born a different gender than we are now doesn't mean that it's appropriate. I actually had, my roommate is very, very cool with everything, but she had a friend over, and her friends had been over, and finally, eventually I told her that I was trans. And I knew she would be okay with it, but she asked some questions that were not okay. One being, what genitalia do I have? Two, can I touch your chest? Yeah. Really? My girlfriend is lucky if she touches my chest. Much less you. No, that's not okay. Can I see it? Please. If you want to go see it, there's Google for that. There's porn. I mean, really. I know people are curious, but there's things that really should not be said. There's lines that should not be crossed. I don't want to talk about what I do in the bedroom. Only with my partner, and even then, sometimes it's still very uncomfortable for me. I don't want to show you any part of my body that's not covered by clothes. There's a reason why I'm not a nudist. So there are questions that are inappropriate, but usually if you use your own mind and actually think things through, how you would feel if somebody asked you that, like the how do you know question, if you are a lesbian or a gay man and somebody asks you, how do you know? Did you have sex with somebody of the same sex or opposite sex? You could change. That's offensive, right?
Yeah.
So whenever you think things through and think about how it is if you were to be asked that, that's a general rule as far as if it should be okay to ask. Another one, not everybody finds offensive, but it can be offensive, is what is your real name? If you say what is your real name, I'm going to say Skylar because that's my real name. But yes, I do know what you're implying. You're wanting to know the name that I was given at birth whenever I was born a female. That I'm not going to tell you because that's not my real name. My real name is what I go by. What you were implying whenever you asked that question is that the gender that that person is identifying as is not real. It doesn't matter to you because no matter what, you're going to see them as the gender that they were born as, and you're always going to think that name once we tell you what it is. So really, what difference does it make what gender I was born as, what name I had when I was born, because that's not my real name. My real name is the one that I have now. So that's another one that can be quite offensive. Any other questions? Yes?
One of the trans women who got married in Dallas the other day I actually went to high school with, so I'm very interested in the story, and I talked about it in my government classes that they're referring to these as the first legal gay marriages in Texas. And I was just kind of wondering if you could go into a little bit more what your feelings are about transgendered women being able to marry women legally in the state of Texas because of the paperwork issue, and maybe in your experiences, how people in the LGBT community feel about that as well.
Okay. I will comment that I have not heard about this particular instance, but I do know enough to tell you what probably happened. So the person was male to female,
Yes.
and married her partner, which was a female.
Correct.
Okay. So male to female, marrying somebody that is cis female. What is cis? Same, right? So your your sex at birth is the same as your gender identity that you identify as. So a cis female would be somebody that was born a female and they identify as a female. Okay? So what happened here is on their birth certificates, they still have male on their birth certificate. So that's how they are able to marry somebody that is a female. And sometimes our lawyers do recommend that to us because otherwise we can't legally marry. I actually do know somebody personally that happened to, and she identifies as a lesbian woman. She's male to female, she identifies as a lesbian woman, and if she did change that, legally in Texas, she wouldn't be able to get married. So this person on their birth certificate has male, and this person has female on theirs. So if they would have changed it, it wouldn't be able to be legal. Now, if they had female, if they did change it, they would only be able to marry somebody that had male on their birth certificate. Not necessarily cis, they don't have to be cis. They can be trans also, as long as their birth certificate says male. Now, in our community, there's really not that much of a problem with it. I personally have a problem with it because I think it's screwed up that the government allows me to marry just because of my gender on my driver's license and birth certificate and everywhere else, and because I'm attracted to the opposite sex, what is now the opposite sex for me. I think that's screwed up because people that I love and care about aren't able to do the same. But as far as the transgender community as a whole, I honestly haven't heard too much backlash about it.
I don't want to be offensive because you said not to ask questions about genitalia, but it's referring to getting your
Surgeries?
information changed over.
Okay.
Like as far as like your driver's license, do you have to have the gender reassignment surgery to get your driver's license changed over?
It depends on the state.
Okay.
In Texas, you do not. But some states you do, and some states will require bottom surgery for people that are female to male, which is basically reconstructive surgery. Can't figure that out. Again, there's Google. I'm not going to go into that here. Same with people that are male to female. There's reconstructive surgery that will count as gender affirming surgery. GRS, gender reconstructive surgery. SRS, sexual reassignment surgery. It's all basically the same thing. But there are states that do require that you do that.
So is it like an expensive and lengthy process to get your
Yes.
stuff changed over, your
Yes.
gender?
In order to get everything legally done, you have to go to a gender therapist. You either have to have 12 sessions or a certain number of hours, I've forgotten. But ultimately, that amount of time you have to have from a gender therapist in order to get your letters. You have to get a letter documenting that you're saying they do believe that you have gender identity disorder, or the new DSM-5 marks it as something else. But you have to continue to have all these different things in order to go up to the highest level.
Is any of it
Whatever it is.
recognized by insurance?
Some insurances do. I actually had a hysterectomy after my name and gender were changed, and I was surprised, but my insurance covered most of it, even though everything said no. They actually did. Yes.
How do you feel about the having to go through therapy and all that before you can choose to change it? You can't just make your own opinion on girls.
I kind of have mixed feelings about it. I understand why they do it. They do it as a safeguard because they don't want you to change everything and then realize it was a big mistake. So not only are they having that person make sure that you're sane, they're also having that person that evaluates you make sure that, yes, you are indeed, I hate to say qualifying type for this type of thing, but
It's not
for
just
lack
a
of,
phase.
yes, that it's not just a phase, you're not just doing it for any other reason, but you actually legitimately do feel this way, and that they really don't think that you're going to go back and change your mind later. But at the same time, it does suck, because I'm perfectly sane, I'm of sound mind, I know what I want in life, and to have to go to a gender therapist, whenever you think therapy, what do you think? Generally negative stuff, right? And so it's not something we really talk about because of that. It's not, and it's still, even with us, it's still looked down upon because it's therapy. Why do I need therapy? Because everybody else thinks I'm crazy. So it's kind of a mixed feeling with me.
Is it hard to find a gender therapist in West Texas? I figure that would be a hard task, and to get a doctor to prescribe your hormones and.
It was. I actually had my letter for hormone therapy about 4 years ago, but I couldn't find a doctor here that would do it. And so it was very hard to find somebody that was able to do it. And whenever I finally did, the letter that I did have was old, so I had to go back and get a new one. But surprisingly, there was one at the time. There was one gender therapist that was pretty well known in the area for gender therapy, and his name is Dr. Keller. And I was able to go to him and start my gender therapy and go through that. But there are, now that I know of, 3 or 4 at least here in Lubbock, Texas. So it's a little bit bigger than you would expect. It's just not as widely advertised. Yes?
So that, I'm sorry, I was having a hard difficulty kind of hearing some, but, so is that, what about filling prescriptions? Were you speaking to that as well? Getting the medicine, are there pharmacies here that
Yes.
will fill those prescriptions?
If your prescription is written by a doctor, you can go anywhere to fill it.
Okay.
It's just treated like a regular medicine. Now, if they write it as the wrong name, then you might have some issues just because it doesn't match your ID. But yeah, but yes, if you have the prescription from your doctor, you should be able to go anywhere. And it is expensive. Surgery and hormone replacement therapy and stuff like that generally is not covered by insurance. So it's mostly, for the most part, out of pocket. And surgery, top surgery for me, is going to be $8,000. And that is relatively cheap compared to other instances, and that's just top surgery. If I wanted bottom surgery as well, it'd be at least 20 grand to get both. At least. And that's all out of pocket. Yes.
Your insurance won't pay, I'm sorry, babe. Your insurance won't pay none of that?
I'm not sure about my insurance currently, but not all insurances, most insurances do not. Because they see it as like a breast reduction or breast implants. Yeah, it's more cosmetic surgery than.
Well, insurances are now paying for that breast reduction.
Some are, but not all. And the ones that aren't are viewing it as a cosmetic surgery, which is optional versus something that is going to make you feel a lot more comfortable in your body. What's your question?
What are some resources available to the transgender community, like websites and stuff like that?
Well, actually, those of you that don't know, I actually have my own transgender support site. It's on Facebook. I started it whenever I wasn't able to find very many outsources out there and resources out there for people like me whenever I very first started to transition. There was hardly anything on social media, so I started one on MySpace back then. Back then, MySpace was a cool thing to do. So I started on MySpace, and then a few years later I transitioned it onto Facebook, and now it's on Facebook, and it has people from all over the world. But Facebook, if you search, you can generally find support sites like that. I actually have several now. It's branched out into other areas, like people that are transgender and they have their parents. people that are parents of somebody that is transgender, allies of the transgender community. We have a lot of different ones, even ones for partners of somebody that's trans, because we're not the only ones that transition. It's everybody around us. It's our family, it's our friends, it's our partners, and it's everybody, and so we're not the only ones that need that support. But yeah, if you Google, you can usually find almost anything. Any other questions? Have I bored you to death yet?
No, are you nervous? Okay, well, why are you doing it?
Because I can't sit still. Yes.
Can you answer? I just want to ask about the way you should react if you mess up and use the wrong gender pronoun.
That's a good question. What she asked was, if somebody mispronouns me, for instance, as a female or of the feminine sorts, how does that person, how should they react if they mispronoun me? The best way is to not make a big deal out of it. It embarrasses them, it embarrasses me. I'd rather it not be a big deal, because then it just draws more attention and that just makes it even more awkward. So just go on, pretend like it didn't happen, and smile nervously, act awkward, and just move on. Like, let's face it, that's what's going to happen. But just move on. Don't draw attention to it, because that just makes it even worse. Any other questions? Yes?
I just wanted to add to that. I read this thing saying don't make it about yourself. Like, if you start over-apologizing, like, you turn it into... Like, you don't want to make somebody have to tell you that it's okay, because, like, it should just, like...
Because it's not okay. In the end, it's not okay. It's not okay that you misgender me. And it shouldn't be about... What she's saying is it shouldn't be about the person that made the mistake, it should be about the person that the mistake was made against. And so, if you start apologizing profusely, we start feeling bad, we have to say it's okay, and then we're lying, because in reality it's just not.
Did your family ever come around for sex?
My dad's side of the family is very large. He has 3 siblings, and most of them have a lot of kids. And then I have my grandparents on his side. My mom, she just has a brother, and then he has 4 kids. So my mom's side of the family is very, very religious. My parents actually divorced a couple years ago, and since then I very rarely even talk to my mother. She's starting to try to come around, but I honestly think because she's conniving and she's trying to make herself feel better. I only say that because I'm not trying to be rude. Believe me, my mother and the person that birthed me, she has done a lot of things over the years. We've never been very close. At one point, she told me that she hopes I get AIDS and die. So I'm not being brutal whenever I say that. I'm being realistic.
Well, that doesn't sound like a religious person to me.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I asked, because they teach you to judge people, to accept people for who they are, and then not to accept just a random stranger, but your own child. Is the reason why I asked.
Yeah. And most of my family, on my dad's side, they weren't okay with it whenever I identified as someone liking the same sex, and they made it very uncomfortable for me. And whenever I came out as transgender, I got messages on Facebook saying that I was crazy, that I had something mentally wrong with me, and stuff like that. So I ostracized myself from them, basically because they couldn't act like adults and get over it. They couldn't see me, they couldn't at least tolerate me and learn to try. They didn't even want to try. They just wanted it to be in the box, and if it wasn't in the box, then it wasn't okay. So I don't talk to that side of the family at all. So the only people I really talk to are my dad, and that's still a very, very strained relationship just because of everything that's happened. And then my cousins on my mom's side, and then the aunt, and that's basically it, out of my very large family.
That's okay, you don't need it.
Exactly.
You have everybody else?
Exactly. You you kind of get thick skin whenever you go through something like this. And I've heard it said before, and I don't understand why people even say this. People say that it's bad, or that we're just doing it to draw attention. Why would you draw attention and lose your whole family, or get kicked out of the house, or have to go through stuff like this? I have to inject testosterone into my thigh intramuscularly every single week. Yes, I have tattoos, but that doesn't mean I want to stab myself weekly. Okay? Much less in my muscle. It's not very fun. It's a needle that's this thick, this long, and it has to go all the way in. And it's a very thick liquid like a barrel syrup. It's not fun. Why would I go through this if I wasn't actually legitimately feeling this way? Yes?
How sore does that get?
Oh, it can get pretty sore. I usually eat a banana afterwards because the muscle is pretty sore and potassium helps.
Now, do you administer it yourself, or
I
do you
do.
have somebody else do it for you?
I do it myself.
I'm going into nursing, and I don't think I can give myself a shot. I know. Yeah, I can do other people, but.
Yeah, it's not fun.
How much longer do you have to do it?
The rest of your life.
It's not something that goes away.
The rest of your life. If you stop taking hormones, you essentially start to revert back. And there's things that won't change completely, but you won't be completely what you are.
And you have to do it every week.
Yes, my prescription personally is every week. Not everybody's is. Some people will take it like every 2 weeks. The dosage is just higher whenever they do that. Yes.
Another question, how much are the hormones going to
If it's outright and it's not covered by insurance, my testosterone is like $104 per vial. And that's just the testosterone. That's not including the syringes and everything else.
And how much does that vial last you?
On my dose, it lasts about 2.5 months.
Okay.
So it's somewhat okay, but it's still pretty pricey.
But with insurance, the insurance covers that?
My insurance does, not all insurance do. My insurance is about $65 per vial. Yes.
How much research have you put into finding insurances and programs and things that do adhere to your needs and like covering the cost of that?
I personally haven't, just because I usually go with, well, I was on my dad's insurance for a while, and he had state insurance, and it happened to cover it, and so I really actually wasn't even expecting it to. I was expecting to pay the full price. I had researched the full price and where it would be the cheapest before. But then I kind of just go wherever there's a job, and if they have insurance, then I take that insurance. Because it's a lot cheaper to do that versus trying to find your own insurance, and the benefits of it just kind of end up balancing out.
You know if the Affordable Care Act has addressed these issues?
No, it hasn't. She says it hasn't. I personally don't know.
Now they force it to adhere to whatever your gender marker is, but there's no cross-gender markers.
So if you haven't changed your gender marker, then they won't. Any
And
other
there's no male. It's only on female.
Oh, so it's only on male to females? If they've changed their gender marker. So female to male people aren't able to on the Affordable Care Act regardless of whether or not they changed their gender marker. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Anything to add?
I've got one question.
Sure.
I'm from the farm, I'm in the top country. So when I talk about race, I talk about white folk and black folk, Hispanic folk, and what about trans folk? Acceptable?
Fine with me.
We're happy in the country.
Anything else? Is that gonna be it? Did I bore you guys to death?
No.
Did anybody learn anything?
Yes.
Okay.
That was a whole lot.
That was